This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The idea behind this is to talk about ways that we can generate business given, the small inventories. You want to attack it from really two different directions. One is, you have a buyer, you just can't find them a home because there's just nothing in MLS. Maybe they have identified a few particular neighborhoods. And then, of course, the other side is, how do you get some more sellers to pop up and maybe get some listings? So there's different approaches here. I'm going to share my screen and just go over some things that I've done in the past that have been successful, or read about, and have some materials I can present for you. And then I want to hear some of y'all's ideas as well. If y'all have tried some of these things and they've worked for you, please speak up. If they haven't worked for you, let us know about that too. Let me share my screen. Okay, so some of the topics we're going to look at: just general farming of neighborhoods, specific farming. This is when you have an existing buyer and they're looking at a particular neighborhood and you're trying to find them a seller. One thing you're going to find with for sale by owners is they're not going to be as market savvy in general as someone working with a listing agent. They're not necessarily going to know that $20,000 or $40,000 is a typical due diligence fee in this market. They might be perfectly happy with a $5,000 due diligence fee. So finding a for sale by owner for your buyer might get your buyer a great deal, or at least great, relatively speaking, in this market. Open houses are always ways to generate business. From your existing clients, you always want to be getting referrals. We'll talk about a few things like that. From vendors that you work with, this might be a source that you've not really utilized. Your vendors can make referrals for you. And then for sale by owners, these would be existing for sale by owners. They already have a sign in their yard, trying to sell on their own. How can you convert them to list with you? Let me hide some of the mess on my screen so I can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so general farming of a neighborhood. I'm going to show you a few letters that I've used in the past. The idea here is you have buyers. They're looking in a neighborhood or neighborhoods. There's nothing on the market right now. You want to see if you can find someone that's maybe thinking about selling their home, but they just haven't pulled the trigger and called a listing agent. Now, these are very effective, especially if you can get permission from your buyers to just use their first name. Reason doing that is you want the people receiving these letters to really understand that you have actual buyers. You're not just fishing for a listing. So let me show you a letter that I've used. This is one. I had a couple of buyers that were looking in a specific neighborhood. I do not know why it came up like that. Let me change that. That's weird. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Now this writing's gonna be a little bit hard to read, but basically this was a letter I sent to Falconbridge neighborhood in Chapel Hill. My clients, Larry and Carol, mention them here, and then again down here. We're looking for a home to buy in Falconbridge. They actually already lived in Falconbridge, and they were looking to downsize and also find a home that had a master bedroom on the first floor. So, first of all, I thank them. Thank you for reading my letter. I'm writing to see if you're considering selling your home. Then I mentioned the names of my buyers. They've lived in Falconbridge for 4 years. They love the neighborhood, but they need to downsize. They need a first floor master. And then I mentioned, they prefer to be less than 2,000 square feet. Now I went pretty specific here. You might want to try an approach where you're not quite this specific, because you don't want to rule out some homes that might not, they might not be quite right for your buyer, but maybe they're close. And the other idea here is if they're not right for your buyer, you may end up getting a listing. So sometimes when you write this, you may want to leave out a few of the details as far as that type of home they're looking for. If you're thinking of selling your home and believe it fits their needs, I'd love to hear from you. I mentioned here their time frame is flexible, and it was. None of these are lies. These are all things that were true about my clients. So I'm telling them here, well, maybe you're not thinking about selling your home right now, but maybe you're thinking about selling it later in the year. That might still work for my clients. Call, text, or email me. I've got my contact information. Now down here, I've got a disclaimer. If you're already listed with a realtor, disregard this notice. I'm just telling them here that I'm not trying to take business from another agent that they're already working with. Now, this letter got 2 or 3. I sent this. I don't remember exactly how many homes I sent this to. I would say it was at least 40. Ideally, you can send out like 100 letters. It depends on how many homes come up that you search for. The more you send, obviously, the better chance you get some responses. I got 2 or 3 responses for this letter right away. However, my buyers actually changed their mind. They ended up not buying. So it didn't go very far. However, around 2 years later, I actually got a call from a guy who saved this letter, and he was ready to sell, and he invited me to interview with him. Now, at the time, I was not actually wanting to take listings in this neighborhood, but I did refer this to another agent, and they ended up getting the listing. So keep that in mind. This may not work right away, but it may be something that gets you some business down the road a ways. I didn't really ask the guy why he decided to save the letter, but he must have been impressed by something in the letter. Now, as far as sending the letter, this is better as a letter and not as a postcard, but you can do these as postcards if you feel like you just can't handle doing letters. If you have the time, it is best that you hand address the letter. People are going to open it a lot more likely if it's hand addressed as opposed to having a label on it. Also, I would say you don't necessarily want to put a return address on this letter. If they see a sticker on the letter that's got a realtor's address, a realtor name, they may just throw it in the trash can. So, normally what I do is I hand address the letter. I don't put a return address, a label on it. I mean, if it doesn't get to them, you don't really need to know that. It doesn't need to come back to you. The post office will just throw it away. So handwrite if you can. You don't necessarily use a return address label, and letters are better. Now, if you've got the time and you can print really well, that would be impressive. But I think just having it a typed letter is fine. Sign it yourself. Now, you notice this one I did not sign. I'm going to show you some other examples where I signed them, and I think that's actually a better way to do it instead of just having your contact information down here. Put sincerely, comma, sign it and put your name that you're a realtor. So what do y'all think? Any questions about this particular format? Has anyone done this similar thing, maybe done it a little bit differently? Any comments? I'd love to hear some of y'all's thoughts.
I mean, I've done letters a lot. I would just say I would mail it in a piece that's going to stand out in the mailbox too. Sometimes I use colored envelopes or larger envelopes as well.
Yeah, I like that idea, especially the colored envelopes. I never thought of that.
Yeah. Here, I'll show you real quick. Let me grab one. I'll use just like these, and I'll actually, because my wife has way better handwriting than me, so I actually make her hand address them.
Good for you. I had some, well, they're grown now, but I had teenagers at the time I was doing this, and I paid them a little bit to do some of the work for me. This is the kind of stuff, if you've got an assistant, this is great stuff to give to an assistant to do. Yeah, so Jan just chatted that she's done this before and got 2 leads like 2 years later. So folks save this stuff. Like they get it, they read it, they think, oh, this sounds like someone I might want to work with, but they're not ready to sell, so they just hang on to it. So I think that's a great idea. Send this out, and if you don't get success right away, don't just necessarily give up and never do this again. Now I'm going to pull out another letter.
Well, I've actually I put a magnetic business card in mine just because naturally I found people will throw it on the refrigerator, and I got a similar story to what you just said, Craig. I had one I sent out, and then 18 months later they called me for a listing appointment, and when I went into their home, my magnet was on their fridge.
Yeah, those magnets are great. Yeah, actually, when I do this, I send out regular. I forgot to mention, I put one business card in the letter, but I've just used regular business cards. I've never used the magnetic ones before. But yeah, magnetic ones are great. Now, if you use a magnetic one, make sure you weigh the envelope and it doesn't require extra postage. Because if it requires extra postage, None of those are going to get where they need to go if you don't put it on there. So make sure that you check that you've got the right postage on your letter. This is one that I sent to. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the one I just did. Let me kill that. This is one that I sent to a neighborhood in Chapel Hill, Meadowmont. This is a very large neighborhood. Now, this is not a. This is just a general farming letter. I didn't have specific buyers for this one. This one says, are you thinking of selling your home? I have a buyer. Now, this is one where I have buyers, but maybe not a specific one. Well, actually, I'll take this back. I'm looking at this one now. I apologize. I was thinking of a different letter. I had a specific buyer here. They just didn't want me to use their name. So I represent a buyer who's very eager to purchase a home in Meadowmont. If you're planning to sell in the next couple of months, I'd love to be able to show your home to my client first. If you'd rather rent, my client may be willing to consider. I notice here I say, if you already have a realtor with whom you've planned to list, please ask him or her to contact me instead. Once again, don't want to get accused of an ethical violation trying to steal another realtor's business. So this was a more general one where I did have a buyer, just didn't identify them. I don't remember the specific buyer here, but they must have told me, no, Craig, I'd rather you not use my name, because I'd always rather use a name if I can. I think this is the one that was a more general one that was just general farming. No, this was specific with a name. Okay, I apologize again. I should have read through these again right before the meeting. This was one for Cold Place. Cindy is a young professional, first-time home buyer. Now, be a little bit careful. Don't tell too much about the buyer because you don't want to get accused of any sort of federal fair housing issues. Young versus old is not a protected class, so young is okay there. First-time home buyer is okay. But, obviously you don't want to say anything about would love to live right next to such and so church. And once again, I told them about the closing time frame, end of May, this was March 20th. Love to hear from you if you're thinking about, selling your home and can meet the desired time frame. Now, she really did need to get in, about when her lease expired. So I just didn't want this to be too wide open. Once again, you can make this a little bit less details. Please call, text, or email. And once again, on this one, I didn't sign it as well. And then I've got another disclaimer down here at the bottom just to make sure that it doesn't look like I'm trying to steal a client. Let's see, I think I have one more of these. Yeah, this one, the Winterfield. Now, this was one where some of my clients that had moved into the neighborhood told me, oh, my neighbors were talking the other day about selling their home. So this was a specific letter I sent to Barbara and Iris. Now, this comes under the category of working by referral. You want to be, talking to your folks, especially your past clients. Once they move into the neighborhood, they've gotten to know some of their neighbors, talk to them, find out, hey, are some of your neighbors thinking about moving? And if they are, how do you contact them? In this situation, they told me I should just, reach out to them by a letter. They didn't know if Barbara and Iris would want me to give them her phone number or their, email address. So they just suggested that I send them a letter. So I wrote them a short letter, mentioned Bill and Vicki, Bill and Vicki said that was fine. And then I told them a little bit about myself, been in business since 2004, managing broker, told them a little bit about Fathom. Now sellers tend to care a little bit more about brand than buyers do. So when you're selling yourself to potential sellers, it isn't a bad idea to tell them a little bit about Fathom Realty. Because, they're going to see a Fathom Realty and sign right in their yard. Buyers don't care. They really don't. The sellers care a little bit. They don't care a whole lot. You really need to sell yourself. But since, Barbara and Iris don't know anything about me, I do want to try to sell myself, but also try to sell Fathom a little bit. So I told them a little bit about Fathom. At the time, we had over 350 agents in the Triangle. Now it's closer to 600. And I don't know exactly how many homes. We're probably third or fourth on the list of how many homes we've by firm in the Triangle. I'm not exactly sure that number. And once again, down at the bottom, just a disclaimer, if you're already working with a realtor, disregard, I'm not trying to steal anybody's business. Now this one, I did sign it. I signed it by hand and mailed this to them. Okay, So any questions? Who else has done this before? Let's look. I've got a couple of things in the chat. Okay, yeah, we already talked about those. So anyone else tried this before, or what do you think? Is this something that y'all could do that might help your business?
I've been sending out postcards, Craig. I send out about 10 postcards to a farming area, probably once every 3 weeks.
What kind of luck have you had?
I've got some responses back from them. A lot of them are just asking questions about the market. Some of them aren't ready to either list their property. I think they're more worried about the economic conditions right now instead of going ahead and doing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some things you should talk to them about as far as, not wanting to sell right now. Remind them interest rates are going up. So it's going to be, it may put a little bit of damper on buyer demand. Obviously tell them about how the home prices are soaring right now because, they may not realize how much their house might be worth. If they're talking about, well, where am I going to buy? Hey, tell them you'll find them a great home. You'll do exactly what you just did. You'll send letters to neighborhoods to find them a home if the area they want to move into is not doesn't have a lot of listings. There are companies, for example, Ribbon, that you can work with that can help them, get their home sold and not necessarily have to buy right away. Or Ribbon will buy the home for them and then they get their home sold. Encompass Lending Group, that's our company we own, has a program with Ribbon. You can check with one of those loan officers. They can explain how that program works. So there are alternatives for your sellers. And the other thing to remind them, if they talk about, well, prices are shooting up, I'm going to have to pay a ton of money for my home when I buy it. It's sort of a wash. They're going to get more money for their home and they're going to have to pay more money for the home they buy. So they're not, having to pay more money for the home they buy is going to be offset by the amount of money they get for their home. If they're downsizing and buying in a lower price point, then, they're going to get a ton of money for their home. They may get enough money from their home that they can use cash to buy their next home if they're downsizing. And hey, that's great because they're going to have a competitive advantage against anyone else bidding on that home who's using a loan if they're buying it with cash. I just got a home under contract with buyers. And there was multiple offers. And after we went under contract, the listing agent told me, hey, your offer wasn't the best. It wasn't the highest, but it was cash. And my client, loved cash. So we went with your buyer. So keep that in mind if they're downsizing and they're not sure where they're going to, or they just don't understand that, they can use money from their sale of their home to buy their next home, and that'll give them a competitive edge. So any other questions or comments or thoughts about, just farming neighborhoods? Do y'all know how to, find addresses in a neighborhood and how to create labels? The thing I use is, I need to log back in. You go into Paragon, you click on the tax button. This used to be Realist, now it's called CRS. And I'm not going to do a class on CRS, but basically, if you do the advanced search, you can search last sales price, deed book, document name, date of last sale. I usually target homes that have been at least 2 years since they sold. Someone that just bought their home 6 months ago probably isn't thinking about selling again. You can start with 2 years. If you get too many homes, then make it 3 years. If you still get too many homes, more than you want to send letters to, make it 4 years. So that's one thing that you can trim down the number of homes you get. If you only have a small number of homes, I wouldn't make the more recent, like go below 2 years, because you're just not going to have much of a success rate. I don't getting responses for someone that just moved in less than 2 years ago. So that's the thing I use for the most part to control, not getting someone that just bought their home. Once you get the sales, you can, download them as labels. Even if you're planning to handwrite the envelopes, I usually just download them as labels, and then I just, I have the labels in front of me, and then I can just write the address. So use CRS is the best way that I know of to get addresses for particular neighborhoods. Now, as far as sending information about the neighborhood, take advantage of Live by Local. That is the new product that we have in IntelliAgent. If y'all don't know where that is, I'll show you that real quick. I'm not going to train you on it, but I'll just show you how to get to it. You go into IntelliAgent. You wait for the thing to stop spinning. You come down to Live by Local, click on that. I'll show you something really quickly because this is a pretty neat tool. Now, once you get into Live by Local, you can search by city, by zip code, by area, by neighborhood, or by address. Let's just do, I'll do Southern Village and Chapel Hill. This is great information to use with your buyers if they want to know more information about a neighborhood. It can, you can put it in neighborhood reports that you send out. Now I need to hide this thing because it's getting in the way. Now it'll do a market report for you. It'll do a community guide. So this is great stuff for your buyers. You can, and if you do the market stats, this is something you can send to these prospective sellers. Shows you the market summary, median sales price. Now this has gone down a lot since last month. That's interesting. I'd want to look at these numbers a little bit more closely to see what's going on. But these generate some good reports that you can use for your clients or for these folks you're sending out to. Okay, so that's, I'm not going to go through it. Just take a look at IntelliAgent and go through there. Now, if there's a neighborhood you like, it's not in there, you can email agent services and just say, hey, I'd love to get this neighborhood added into Live by Local, and they'll forward it on to the Live by folks, and try to get your neighborhood in there.
Greg.
Yes.
I did want to ask you a question about this specific piece, because I'm sure that several others in here have ran into this. I used to do that, and I didn't get a lot of responses, and I think that I figured out why. I'm going to do a listing appointment today in Raleigh, and I did the analysis in RPR and another site, and I got a number 375. But this man has already let me know prior to the appointment. He had sent me screenshots of some internet site he's using, and he's convinced that 400 to 410 and this, that, and the other. And I just wanted to ask you your thoughts on that, because obviously we know that there are sellers and buyers out there that don't know what we know about the market. And could this hurt us if we send a blind letter and information and we're putting a number on that? Well, if they're convinced that neighbor so-and-so, and they don't understand comps, and they say, well, the neighbor's home sold for such and such, and I should be able to get such and such, couldn't that also hurt us maybe, and maybe not get a reply?
Well, okay, so if you're putting in general, I would never put in a specific number like, oh, hey, I've already done an analysis of your home and I think it's worth X. I never give sellers a number until I've been through the home and I've had a chance to go back and review everything. So the only numbers I would put in a letter just sending out to a neighborhood are just general neighborhood letter, just statistics like, oh, hey, do you know in your neighborhood in the last 6 months, 20 homes have sold, and here's the average price, et cetera, et cetera. So I would just send general numbers, but I would never put a specific price on there. And if you want to put some wording in there saying, your home may vary depending on, certain specific characteristics or something like that, just to let them know that, the average home sold for $200 a square foot, but if your home, is about to fall apart and whatever, it may not sell for $200 a square foot. As far as them having a number higher than you, it depends on the neighborhood. Some neighborhood, people are going way above list price, and if you've got a neighborhood that's going way above list price and you're looking at comps, things are appreciating more quickly sometimes than what you can find in comps. If you find comps that are 2 months old, it may have already appreciated by $25,000 just in those last 2 months. So keep that in mind when you're pricing homes. Some neighborhoods are shooting up so fast that you can't keep up with them as far as comps, and you just have to price them a little bit higher than you think the comps really show. And when you're working as a buyer agent and you talk to your buyer, you have to recognize that there are some buyers out there that are ignoring the numbers. They don't care. They're paying way over the value of the home because they got the money and they want to move into this area, and they're willing to overpay. So you talk to your buyer, and sometimes you have to tell your buyer, well, I can't support this price that you're going to have to pay to get this home with comps. It is not going to appraise. And if you're willing to pay the difference on that appraisal so you can still get your loan, then you can overpay for this home. And if you're not willing to do that or not able to do that, then we just need to go look for another home. That's just the reality of this market. So keep that in mind. You may not be able to properly comp homes in this market. Things are shooting up so fast. So let's talk a little bit about some existing clients. Now, there's lots of training out there on working by referral. I showed you one example where I had some clients that told me, hey, the neighbors, we're talking about moving, so, send them a letter. Definitely get your sellers to tell you about any neighbors that might also be thinking about moving. Get your sellers to tell you about anyone they may have talked to in the past that wants to move into the neighborhood. They may buy your seller's home, or they may buy a different home. So you may get them as a buyer for your listing, or you may get them as a buyer for another home in the neighborhood. So really talk to your sellers about their neighbors and other people they know that might be a potential listing for you or a potential buyer for you. And the same goes with your buyers. They may know someone that is also thinking about buying a home. So work your existing clients, both currently looking and work your sphere. So let's talk about vendors. I've got a list here. This was prepared by Joe, oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name. I think Nego, who works with Brian Buffini on Brian Buffini's course. I'm also blanking on the name of that. But basically, he had a series about getting listings, and one of the topics was building a bridge to your contractors. So these are what Joe says are the top 10 contractors to target. Maybe you have a favorite general contractor you work with. You call up your general contractor. Hey, have you been doing any work for some folks lately that are maybe doing that work because they're talking about putting their home on the market? Oh yeah, such and so has me over there repairing their deck, and they mentioned, asking what's going on. They mentioned, yeah, they're thinking about selling next spring. Get their information, call them up or mail them or knock on their door, whatever your contractor may give you some advice on that. Hey, such and so was working on your home and told me you're thinking about selling. Are you already working with a realtor about that? If they say no, might be a listing for you. Carpet service. A lot of times when people are thinking about getting their home on the market, they may either clean or replace their carpet. If you've got a company that you've maybe referred some buyers to in the past, call them up. Hey, I know you ended up putting the carpet in such and so's home. Oh yeah, thanks for that referral. Well, yeah, well, how about have you been working with anyone that's talking about selling their home? Cleaning service. People get their homes cleaned before they're ready to list. Yeah, so Jan just put in a comment about an inspector she worked with, gave her a referral. Electrician, handyman. Maybe you have a favorite handyman. Let your handyman know, hey, if someone calls you up to do some work on their home, be a little chatty with them. See if they tell you they're thinking about selling their home, let me know about it. Landscaping. Obviously, people that are thinking about putting their home on the market want it to look nice. So they get landscaping. Painters, plumber, roofers, HVAC. So these are all good types of folks. If you have a relationship with one, you're sending them referrals. You expect them to send you back referrals. Folks appreciate it when you refer business to them. And if you've got an electrician, this electrician knows that if he sends you or she sends you a referral, well, you're probably likely to send them some business back. So it's a two-way street there. And hey, depending on if you're the type of person that loves taking people out to lunch, take your electrician out to lunch and find out who they've been working with that might be selling a home. That's something you can do as well. Instead of just calling them up on the phone, maybe you meet them for coffee or whatever. So who else has had an experience? I had a painter that I worked with. He painted my home, and he told me about a home in the neighborhood that just that situation, I ended up listing it. This will work, but you need to work these folks. Talk to them. You ever send them any business? Hey, let me know if, you can send me some business in return, and they'll be more than happy to do it, because they know if they send you someone, they'll get business, keep getting business from you. Anyone else had any experiences with, someone like this, sending them some business? Yeah, Justin's had 2 from his home inspector. So this is great stuff to do. Call them, email them, whatever, whatever works, and get business from some of the folks that you work with. Yeah, so Deanna just said an inspector that she worked with turned into a client. So that's a good thing too. When you're talking, to a home inspector, just chat them up, see if they're thinking about selling their own home. You might get some business from them as well. Okay, let's see what else I've got here. Okay, so let's talk about befriending a FSBO. So here's just, this is from Joe Nego, just to give you an idea. This is a very simple, short note you can send to a for sale by owner. I notice you have your home on the market. Now this is one where you don't have a buyer. So you're saying, if I had a buyer willing to pay a price acceptable to you, are you willing to entertain that opportunity? Is it possible for me to take a tour of your home? So see here, you're telling them, if I had a buyer. You're not saying I have a buyer. Now, if you have a buyer, it's better to say, I have a buyer interested in your home. But if you don't, you can say, if I had a buyer, are you willing to entertain that opportunity? Here it is written as a note. This might be something you just write a note and stick it on their door. If you're, brave enough or, willing to go and knock on a door, that's really the better way to do it. Just knock on the door and start talking to them. But, this one, you keep it pretty simple. And he likes this wording. He was, talking about this in the video. If I had a buyer willing to pay a price, so that's some good wording that you might want to use. Willing to pay a price acceptable to you. So are you willing to entertain that opportunity? So you're not making any promises here. You're just basically, saying if you had a buyer. So you go through, you see their home, and now this is where you start giving them some input on their home. There's training on working with FSBOs, and I wasn't going to go through that today, but just want to give you the idea as an introduction to FSBOs. Maybe you turn one of them into a listing if they're not getting their home sold. Now in this market, FSBOs aren't the best source of business as far as converting one that's already got a sign in the yard. They are great for your buyers, or for if they don't have the sign in the yard yet, and convincing them to sell. But if they've already got their sign in the yard, they're probably going to get the home sold on their own, because this market is just so, the way it is. If you've noticed the sign in the yard for a week or so, that's a good time to go talk to them, because they've been reading articles and seeing about how homes are selling instantly for tons of money. And if their home's set for a week or so, they might be getting a little worried. So I would say, if you see a sign pop in the yard day one, don't bother them day one. But once it's been in the yard for a week or so, that might be a great time to go knock on the door, or put a note on their door, or send them a letter, however you want to do it. So anyone has success converting?
Hey, Craig. Yeah. So I've noticed some of the FSBO sellers, they even put in their listing, like, don't contact me if you're a listing agent, I'm not interested. Like, has anybody actually had any success, like actually still getting through to them, or do you just respect that?
Well, no, if they have something that says, do not contact me if you're a listing agent, I'm not interested, then stay away from them with this scenario. Now, if you already have a buyer, you're not going to them as a listing agent, you're going to them as a buyer agent. So in that scenario, you're fine. You say, hey, I've got a buyer and I'd love to, see your home because my buyer might be interested. That would be fine. And then what might happen is, if your buyer doesn't like the home, you can still give them some input on the home, give them some advice, and say, hey, if you don't mind, I'll send you some marketing information. It might help you out. You might, turn them into a listing, even though they, but you're not approaching them as a listing agent. You're approaching them as a buyer agent, because you have a genuine buyer. So that's fine.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah, trying to convert them after you bring them back.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, one more. This is another thing from Joe Nego. This is one I just sort of pulled from his things and used it as an actual letter. So this is one where I don't remember when I sent this, but a lot of this stuff is funny, is almost, still applies in this particular market. Rise and shine. Believe it or not, there are more buyers looking for homes than homes to sell. That's for sure. Once overrun with foreclosures and short sales has changed for the better. Due to demand, home prices are on the rise. They're approaching double-digit appreciation. I think we've actually already hit that. So, if you use something like this, you obviously want to get some current data. Is it time? Over the past 3 decades, the average homeowner stayed in their home for 4.9 years. Now, that number might have changed some since I sent this letter. Due to recent economic uncertainty, families have stayed in their home for more than 9 years, postponing the move. Financial storms are behind us and the sky is starting to clear. So this, some of this is going to have to change, but basically, you've got rise and shine. You're telling them, hey, the market has turned around. It's now great. Is it time for you to move? And then you've got some information that your home might be worth more than you think. It'd be a privilege to give you some insight in today's market. I'll give you an accurate assessment of your home's value. 30 minutes is all you'll need. So this is where you're sort of teasing them here. You're not giving them the information. You're telling them, hey, invite me into your home and I will give you some information about the market, tell you how much your home is worth. So basically you're inviting them to give you a listing appointment. So, three parts to this letter. One, you're just sort of giving them a general idea about the market, how it's great now for sellers. The middle part, you're saying, well, look, how long have you been in your home? So this is one you want to go ahead and do some research and you see that they've been in their home for a while. You can send this to them and say, hey, here's the average. How long have you been in your home? Folks are looking, wow, maybe it is time to sell. I've been in here for 10 years and most folks have sold after only 6 years. And then you invite them to ask you into their home for a listing appointment. Give them your contact information. Now, the one thing this doesn't have, and I should have had this in here, is I always like that disclaimer about if you've already been working with a realtor, you already got your home listed, please ignore this. So that should have been added into here. Any questions about this approach? This is just another approach to try to draw out a FSBO for someone who does not already have a sign in their yard. Okay, I believe this is one other thing I wanted to show you. This was just a letter that I drafted that sort of says, hey, sell the home now. I drafted this right at the beginning of the pandemic because, what happened when the pandemic occurred is everyone just, locked themselves in their home and said, I'm not doing anything until COVID is gone. So just to get, obviously this doesn't, there's still some people that are worried about COVID. So if you come across someone that, is still a little worried, you can talk about some of the things that are done, to mitigate that. We're having overlapping showings now. So a lot of this isn't going to apply, but the general idea here is, here I mentioned, if you wish to eliminate showings altogether, we can go coming soon, and maybe you'll get a sight unseen offer. Now, once the coming soon period is over, they might say, well, what now? I still don't want to show my home. Maybe you can convince them to go to a hotel for the weekend. Tell them we'll probably get your home sold over the weekend, and I'll pay for somebody to come in and clean your home after, before you go back in it. So you got some ideas there. Here at the time, I was talking about, some other things that were happening when COVID was going on, that, some of the things that government's, stimulus programs that were going to help the economy and make sure that, there would still be buyers out there. So this isn't something that really applies now, but, do some research, think of some reasons why sellers should be selling now and not waiting. I talked earlier about the interest rates going up. That's one thing. Do some research on your own, figure out some other things that are going on that might encourage, a seller to sell now versus selling later. Put them in a letter or put them in the farming letter that you're sending to that neighborhood. If you're sending a series of letters, one of them might be, hey, why you should sell now versus why you should wait. So any questions about that? One thing this talks about too, before I put this away, there still may be a lot of foreclosures coming. You know, you read different articles, there's different thoughts on that. If there are a lot of foreclosures coming, one thing that's going to do is that is going to put a lag on the rising home prices, because foreclosures are generally going to sell for less. So that's one thing. If there are a flood of foreclosures, our inventory is going to get better. That's not a great way to have better inventories, a lot of foreclosures, because that's, you know, bad for the people that got foreclosed on. But it is a fact that there will be more inventory. So that is going to put a lower, you know, drag on the prices going up, as well as the fact that the foreclosure is generally going to sell less anyway. So if you're talking to a seller, you know, you want to give them incentive. Well, let's sell now before that stuff happens, and you may start to see prices come down a little bit. So let's take advantage of the market now. So anyone have any other questions? Let me unshare my screen. So lots of ideas that might generate some business for you. I really want to emphasize, I think the opportunity is there to find for sale by owners for your buyers. And if you find one, you're probably going to get a better deal. You're not going to be dealing with multiple buyers. You're just dealing directly with that for sale by owner. So you're not seeing, you know, upwards, you know, bidding war, that kind of thing. It's really a good, and, you know, you always want to talk to them, say, look, if you need to get representation, find yourself a listing agent, but otherwise I can work with you as an unrepresented seller. Give them a working real estate agent's brochure or a form, have them initial, or actually mark the last blank. They don't initial, you mark it for them and have them sign it. That, you know, indicates they're unrepresented. Justin, I know you and Matt just unmuted. When you guys want to add something?
Yeah, I just got a few things. So I think I've shared this before, but it's just stuff that I've done personally that's helped, but it does take legwork. So I had a young lady who wanted to live in a townhome community in Raleigh, and she didn't have the funds to overpay and $20,000 due diligence. So on a Saturday morning, we walked the neighborhood, and I made her come with me with a contract, with a working with real estate disclosure, with a checkbook, and we just door knocked. We met for breakfast. We game planned everybody who's owned their home longer than 2 years, and on the 20th house, we actually bought a home. And then I had a person this past summer who wanted to live in Harrington Grove. We lost 5 offers, offering over $400,000. So we took the same approach, and they ended up buying a home for $380,000. Now we couldn't get that person to pay the real estate commissions, but even these folks paid me out of their own pocket, but they were still, you know, 11 grand under what we were losing bids out, and they didn't have to write a $25,000 due diligence check. Another thing I'm working on now is I have somebody who's approved, don't have excess of funds, but I'm trying to create a partnership with some home flippers I've been seeing to say, hey, I already have a buyer who's pre-approved for this amount. This is what they're looking for in a home in these areas, and try to get an agreement where they buy the home, they flip it, and then maybe, you know, can sell it right to my people and have a buyer already on hand. That's another approach I'm working on. I haven't been successful yet. And then I would say your relationships with local realtors too. It's a regret I have. When I first got in the business, my broker at the time said, why would you want to network with other agents? But now I have like the opposite approach, where we just won a due diligence, or just won a multiple offer on a 250 home when we didn't even go above listing price. And the listing agent told me basically it's because I've done 2 deals with her in the past 12 months, and both of them were as smooth can get. So, you know, so I think that goes a long way as well. So those are just some other approaches. I know it does take legwork, and it's not going to be successful every time, but I've had success with that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I've never heard of someone walk in the neighborhood with a contract in hand. That's amazing. I'm glad that's really incredible, that work. Yeah, and networking is great, and working with other, because that really can make a difference. Because, you know, if you've got 2 offers in hand as a listing agent, and you happen to know both of those realtors, and one of them is a pain in the rear to work with, and the other one is great to work with, I mean, you can say, you can make a comment to your seller about that. There's no fair housing issues with that because you're just talking about the realtor. You're not talking about the buyers. And if you like when you work with a little better and their offer is not quite as good, you can talk to your buyer and say, look, we'll probably have a smoother transaction with this realtor. That's my experience. You've got to be careful though, because you can't talk down the second realtor. You just have to talk up the first one. If you talk down a second realtor, that's an ethical violation. So it's really more talking up the realtor you've worked with. But keep that in mind. In your head, you don't want to work with realtor X, but when you talk to your client, you just got to say why you'd rather work with, why you'd like to work with realtor Y. Because they're someone that you've worked with before and you kind of had a great situation with them, a great experience with them. So just make sure you do remember that. Don't talk down the other realtor, just talk up the one you like. Another thing that I forgot to mention, I actually had one of my agents sent me an example and I forgot to make it ready to show you guys, is when you submit an offer. Now we don't want buyer love letters. Please do not do a buyer love letter, but you can do hey, my client really loved this home. They thought that it was really decorated really well. Things like that. You can, we can see that the sellers put a lot of love into this home, and my buyer, you can sort of, really dress up the offer and explain how the buyer really wants the home without making it a buyer love letter where you're talking about their family and their aspirations and all that kind of stuff. So, don't just send it and say, hey, here's an offer for X home, but say, here's an offer for X home. My clients were really impressed by the such and so, or, stuff like that, where you're not talking about your clients, but you're just talking about, is it inappropriate to let everyone know I'm going to have two? No, I don't think so, Jan. That's fine. Jan, call me offline afterwards if you want to explain that a little more. So you can sort of, tell a little bit why your buyers like the home, but don't go into details about your buyers so much. Just, sort of you're sort of trying to compliment the sellers on how they took care of the home or how they did this or whatever. And just, make it, give them a good feeling about going into this transaction.
And also, I wanted to say back to the letters, you can also, you follow up with a phone call after you send the letters and just say, hey, I sent you a letter a few weeks ago. Just curious if you or if you know anybody who are selling a home. That's a little one extra step, but if you reference the letter, the phone call isn't that bad.
Yeah, if you can get phone numbers, obviously check the do not call list. Make sure you don't call someone that's on the do not call list. And the other way to follow up letters is door knocking. If you want to go through a neighborhood, send a letter first, follow it up with a door knock, or do what Justin talked about and walk through the neighborhood with a contract. And I like how you had the buyer with you, because that way, you get it executed right then and there. Buyer signs, seller signs, you got a contract. That's great. But yeah, if you want to send a letter and then follow up with either a phone call or door knock, that is going to be more effective than just sending letters. Now, if it's not practical for you, you can't walk neighborhoods for whatever reason, or you just don't feel safe, or whatever the problem is, that's fine. Letters are better than nothing, but yeah, following up is definitely going to help.
And send more than one letter too.
Yeah, keep following that up as well. Another thing you can do, which is sort of more into prospecting, follow up your, if you do a video and you post it on your Facebook page, post the same video 2 weeks later. Someone might miss it, so they see it again. Repeat things that you do. If someone sees it twice, no big deal, but half the people that missed it the first time will see it the second time. So do things multiple times.
Yeah, another idea too to find homes is you go back 2 or 3 years and look for expireds, but they still haven't sold their home, and just say, hey, I noticed you were looking to sell your home 2 or 3 years ago. You didn't sell it. I have a person who wants to possibly interested in your house if you'd reconsider. That's another thing too, is just go back a couple of years and look who tried to sell but were unsuccessful.
Yeah, that's great. In this market currently, there aren't too many expired listings that just expired. There's still a few. But yeah, going back a few years, that's a great idea, Justin. And you know, you don't have to go too far back, I would think, for that to be effective, because sometimes
Just
folks,
go back, yeah, just back before COVID, just go back to 2019. I just did a quick search just in Johnston County, and there's 100.
wow, yeah. So there's another list of possible sellers. Anyone have anything else? Any other ideas for getting some business right now? You know, I think if you take one or two of these things and really work them, you'll get some leads. You know, the more you can do, the better, obviously. But if you really put some effort into it, I think you can generate some new inventory for your buyers, or some new, you know, listing inventory for yourself. You know, there's lots of people out there that I think are just, they're thinking they'd like to sell, but they're a little afraid right now. They just don't understand, or they're afraid about, where am I going to move to? So really let them know you'll really dig in and find them a place to move to. Talk to them about some of these bridge companies that can help them, you know, find their new home before they sell the home they're in. That's something that, you know, I think is very applicable to today's market. We've got some training on that on the Fathom Wiki. You can just call one of our loan officers with Encompass. They know about the Ribbon program. They can talk to you about that. And some of those things might help you if you do have a potential seller who's just, you know, hey, where do I move to? So keep that in mind as well, as something that, you know, can generate some business for you. So anyone have anything else they'd like to add? Okay, well, I hope y'all got some great ideas from this. I am recording this, and I will post this. I'll probably put it in YouTube and have a link in the Facebook group. So if you want to watch it again and maybe, you know, copy down some things, you'll be able to do that. All right, well, I hope you guys have a great day, and get out there and find some homes to sell. Talk to y'all later.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it.